Welcome back to the Church Resource, where we talk about all the best resources for churches, leaders, and lay people. Lucas Pinckard, and I'm here with the doctor.
What's up?
Chris Respass. What's going on, man?
I don't know nothing, bro. How you?
Bro, that becomes more and more apparent to me every day, how little we actually know.
I don't know a thing.
Speaking of, one of the things that I want to talk to you about is the role of AI within the church.
Okay.
Let's talk about it, man.
Yeah, let's do
So there is a lot of concern when it comes to AI. We'll kind of keep it's worth noting, but I don't know that it's worth us addressing within this. That there are some people who believe that no one within the church should use AI. That it is it's part of end times. Their end times theology. This is what's going to happen because. Yeah, right. Yeah. So between the Book of Revelation and the Terminator movies, they've determined, that diminishes our brothers who believe that a little too much. But yeah, so there's a bit that says that, and then there's some people who are embracing it to the point where it's writing everything for them. Mm-hmm. There was a pretty famous case early on in ChatGPT, I think in the 2.0 version of it, where they had AI completely create a talk for a Christian conference in Germany, and AI delivered the sermon, which is a weird thing. So those are your opposite ends of the spectrum. Don't touch it because it's, it's what's going to get us, or embrace it to the fact that now this program can lead churches, right?
Right.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So let's first off, I'm curious as to what your dealings with AI are. Like, how much are you using it? Sure. What do you guys use it for? Do you find it as an effective tool?
Right. So, when we planted our church, I felt like technology was going to be how we could, forgive me for phrasing it this way, compete in the, if you will, church marketplace, especially being in the, in the Bible Belt where there are literally churches everywhere, not having staff or whatever, or at least as much staff you felt like you needed. I felt like technology was going to be a, real resource for us. So, I'm open to it. We're open to it. As it relates to AI in particular, I do use it because of my background. It tends to be more of either a quick administrative assistant, or a research assistant.
Okay.
Give me some suggestions for this, or help me rephrase that, or, draft a, thank you note for this kind of scenario, that just becomes like a first draft for me.
Right.
That I tweak. So I use it, probably overall in the ministry, I'm probably in the minority, in that sense at our church,
right.
But I think to some extent, maybe the research piece, but I think people are probably dabbling in it, but it's not writing any sermons for me.
100%.
Because it's not anointed. Amen.
Agreed. Right. Like, so this is one of those things is like, there is a potential for use for it. Right.
Right.
And we see kind of all throughout the scriptures that technology is utilized, like not in the way that we would recognize it today.
Sure.
But if you look at the way that the gospel was spread along the roads of Rome.
Exactly.
Which was groundbreaking technology, no pun intended, technology of the time.
Right.
We've seen a lot of people that have embraced streaming lately, right? And the way that we look at these tools, positively and negatively, I think has an ability to affect. I think the less aware we are of how to use certain tools, the more we, I think, really ignore the dangers of them, right? So, and that's not to say because you can always use the argument, well, you don't have to use cocaine to know cocaine's dangerous. It's like, agreed.
Right.
But at the same time, with these kind of technological tools that are they're in everybody's hands.
Sure.
Right? We see in particular that our students are using them at incredible rates.
Right.
There's a new study from MIT that just came out People that used AI for 4 months straight, they did brain scans at the beginning of the study and at the end of the study. So here's what 4 months of AI usage has revealed. 83% of the people could not remember what they wrote a few minutes after finishing it. You write something, press save, and your brain forgets instantly because you weren't thinking about it. It was something that the AI wrote. Brain scans showed the damage clearly. Neural connections dropped from 79 to just 42, so 74% loss in brain connectivity. If your computer lost nearly half of its processing power, you'd say it was broken. That's exactly what's happening to the brains of people who are using AI consistently. Teachers couldn't tell which essays were written, but they knew something was off. Teachers described the essays written by AI as soulless, empty of real content, flawless language, but no personality or personal insight.
Wow.
So that it put the students at a cognitive depth. When researchers asked AI to write without any AI help, they did worse than people who have never used AI at all. It's just dependency, or it's not just dependency. They're saying AI usage creates cognitive atrophy.
Wow.
And it's been measurable within this. It cuts the germane cognitive load essential for real learning by 32%. And there's a bunch of other stuff that's been discovered in this. One of the things that we found out in podcast production is we'll take our scripts that are generated based off of an AI model of sorts, right? Because it's looking at and listening to what's being said and creates the subtitles.
Right.
And then we'll take those scripts and we'll put them into an AI and have it read the script and then return for us a description of it. And we'll check the descriptions.
Right.
One of the things that we found recently is that if we were to do that and not give it the transcript, it will make up quotes. Ugh. Right. So you and I are having a conversation. I say, hey, listen, Chris and Lucas this week talked about AI usages. Please create a description for this. I don't have a transcript for you. It'll do it, and then it will create quotes for you and I based off of nothing.
Ooh.
So I asked the program. I said, "Hey, where did you get these quotes from?"
Yes.
Right, 100%. Right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't give you a transcript. Where did it come from? The program apologized to me, which is weird.
It is weird,
right? And then asks if I can just give it the transcript. So I had to press the program again and say, hey, where did you do this? It generated it based off of what it felt like we might say about that based off of previous conversations and things that it picked up. Get this, things that it picked up from scouring our sermons offline.
Oh, my goodness.
So, like, there are some things within it that can be helpful.
Yes.
Right? You mentioned using it for rephrasing, things like that. Certainly can be helpful for that. One of the things that we've really found most helpful with AI is helping us determine what people are interested in watching.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So if you're looking primarily at content creation, there's a prompt that we've used that's proven to be really interesting because like I took it and I workshopped it a little bit and talked to some people about it, where if you type in a subject, hey, return from me 10 fears, frustrations, and desires that people have when communicating the gospel, make the x-axis, fears, frustrations, desires, and the y-axis numbers 1 through 10, and it puts it all in a chart for you. And a lot of times it's the same thing, just rephrased as a fear, desire, and frustration. But it does a wonderful job of looking at search engines and doing a quick, though very thorough dive into what those things are. And then when you go and you talk to people about it, like I put some questions out to my congregation of like, hey, does this resonate with you? And they're like, every one of those 10 things, the people would have like 7 or 8 of them that were in their top 10. So it's doing a really great job of figuring out what those things are. So now we know that, hey, if we're going to create online content, this is what we should do.
Okay.
These are the subjects that we should cover. These are the things that we should do. But it does a terrible job of writing the scripts for those, of communicating the point for those, and it does end up being, as the MIT study proved, pretty soulless, wooden, and lack of personality. So before we get to where, is it appropriate for Christians to use AI? And if it is, then we'll have some follow-up questions about that. Dr. Respass.
Oh, yeah, you put it on me. Yeah. I'm so far from MIT, it's not even funny.
Just geographically.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Don't pull out no SAT scores. To phrase it that way, you're asking whether or not it's a moral thing. Is it?
Because that's the question.
Yeah.
That is the question that people want answered. Yeah. Is there anything morally wrong about using AI?
So, are you cheating? Right. And
that could be applied in a lot of ways, right?
Seriously, right? So I think
like cheating in the sense of are you cheating in school, having to write your essays?
Are you cheating? Are you being deceptive, intentionally so? You know what I mean?
Are you using AI? Or are you representing what AI did as your own original work?
That,
yeah,
or
because that is a form of dishonesty.
Yeah.
Right.
So just generally speaking, on its face, I don't think it is morally improper for a Christian to use AI any more than it is to use a computer to type your paper versus handwriting it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to look at it purely as technology, right? A friend of mine said, one of the challenges with the church is still thinking Gutenberg when the rest of the world is on Google, right? It's this, so we have this tendency to be nostalgic about older methods of doing modern things, right?
Yep.
So, printing
bit of a
press,
golden age syndrome,
exactly,
kind of a thing,
right? Yeah. So
I still liked the flannel graph.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, I don't necessarily think it's improper. Can there be improper uses of it? Mm-hmm. Right. Which is always the danger to which you've alluded. Not to mention, the quote unquote "I'm dumber for having used it" issue, right? And the brain connectivity. But there's some improper uses. I allude to me not using it, for example, to do my sermon, because of just the nature of that process.
Yeah.
Right. If one of my staffers came and said, I use ChatGPT to suggest an outline for a conference, I wouldn't be upset about that, right? Yeah. Because that's going to be a draft, right? That's going to be
modified.
Yeah, it's going to be modified. It's a starting point. It's a prompt.
Sure.
We used to have those in my English class when I was in grade school. We had to write a piece and have a prompt.
Yep.
Right.
And there are a couple of pastors' handbooks that I have.
Yeah.
Right. Kent Hughes has one. I think O.S. Hawkins has one. MacArthur's got one that are all on my shelf. That hey, if I want to do a funeral, I look up in the back. Hey, here's the funeral, and then there's 5 things.
Exactly.
Right. That here's different funerals. If you want to do the Lord's Supper, there's one. Easter services, Good Friday services. They've got all these different outlines and varying degrees of traditional liturgy that are there, and how you want to do it. And you could do it. So using it to create an outline or a prompt,
right. And let's just be honest. There are those of us who say, "Hey, man, if you preach a sermon out of a sermon outline book, there's something wrong."
For sure.
That feels like it's cheating, right? It feels like it's being deceptive. You're presenting it as your own when it's not. And that's not to say we can't tweak it, right?
For sure.
So I would just say off the cuff, no, I can't think biblically if you're not using it for an improper mode, which I would think would be like to do your sermons, right? To pass it off as yours, I think that would be improper. But staying in the general realm of, kind of modifying, helping with some research, because that's what you described, when you were talking about your podcast. I mean, it's doing the legs, it's a research assistant.
Yep. And
I think it, giving the access to information that we have, we don't have, from an efficiency standpoint, we don't have time to research all of the possibilities on the social sciences side, that would help us better connect to people. And so I would use it as a research tool. What do you think? Do you think it's morally wrong?
I think that there's two different ways that people are viewing it, and that there's a lot of people that are stuck in kind of a gray area, right? Is that you have people that refer to it or refer to AI personified. I asked it a question, it gave me, and then ChatGPT told me blah blah blah, right? That when you do that and when you're personifying it, then you stop looking at it as a tool.
Sure.
And I think that that's a really important thing. And this is not because I've watched The Matrix too many times in my life, but this is right. But this is because there is a certain way of viewing this, whereas if you begin to rely on any tool too much, you begin to personify it and think of it as its own entity. And when we begin to think of computer programs in particular as their own entity, it's an issue. And this is not just a new phenomenon with AI. It's something that has to do with all computer programs. I mean, when you were growing up playing video games, if you couldn't beat a boss, what would you say? The game is cheating. Yeah. Right? Like we've given it a personality. Sure. We've done that. We've done that. Now, there are certain things that programmers can do in order to make things more difficult, yada yada. But to make those kind of claims, it's a tool. And just like, and I'll use this one in particular because we're recording with video cameras right now. Right. Right? There is nothing morally wrong with us using the video camera as a tool. Now, what we do in front of the camera, correct, that changes dramatically whether or not that tool is used in a morally wrong way. Right. And I'll use that one, for instance, because it's a tool that's used for wonderful things when they go to further the gospel or educate people with that. And in the opposite end of things, have put people in places where they've been in the deepest, darkest parts of their addictions that have ruined their and other people's lives. Right. Right. So, but the item itself or the program itself is a morally neutral thing. What we have to fight against is how does our sin nature, has the depravity within ourselves, however we want to put it, right? How are we looking to use that tool? Yeah. And you can see pretty clearly that there are different lines that are being drawn. For instance, in Europe right now, the legislation for AI limits what it can do within the EU, within the UK, and those kinds of things. And so one of the things that the technology people over in Europe are kind of fighting right now is that in the United States, in Australia, in parts of East Asia, that they're going to be so far behind in getting AI models out there in order to solve complex issues because of the limitations of it, that it's going to put them at a technological disadvantage. Whereas, in the United States, we don't have that. Does that make something better or worse? Right. Because of that, it depends on the end user. Sure. And yeah, I would have to agree with you that when you look at it in terms of can it be useful? Now, one of the things that's on all of the different AIs that you use, and ChatGPT is not the only one, but it's probably the most popular, right? It's the best as far as when you're looking at like a jack of all trades kind of thing. Right. There's a thing up there that says ChatGPT can be wrong. Yeah. Right. And when you see that, and then you don't kind of take heed of it, then you put yourself in a place where you may unwittingly be giving people bad information. Right. but you are unwittingly giving them bad information, but knowingly opening the door that might be the case.
Sure.
Right? Like if I know, you're allergic to peanuts and I didn't go check out where this candy bar I'm going to give you was made, the knowledge that you're allergic to peanuts is something that should impact the way that I hand this to you.
Absolutely.
Right?
I
Like,
should
hey,
check it.
here you go.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's got nut oil in it or not, but instead, if I give it to you, we both know that I know that about you.
Mm-hmm.
I could be handing you something poisonous, but you're going to trust that I'm not.
Right.
And so that's one of those things is there is a certain degree of, and I'm not meaning to talk in circles here, but there's a certain degree, as we use it, particularly as teachers, as preachers, as pastors, if we're using it to write our sermons, one, we've already talked about, it's not anointed.
Right.
Right. But the second is there may be some really errant information that's in there.
Right.
That because it's coming out of our mouths and because people trust us, that now all of a sudden it's become, something that they take and believe, and we're unwittingly, though potentially knowingly, leading people astray in certain areas. So I do as far as when it comes to maybe creating prompts, research, outlines, helping with some templates for things if we're really stuck, that type of stuff. I think there's certainly some uses for it there.
Yeah.
But as far as preaching, teaching the word and those kinds of things, that's where I think, it's beyond you have to draw the line. I think that is where you get into hey, this is a morally wrong thing to do.
Right.
Right. And then in particular, when you're taking something that has been likely plagiarized by a computer program and now you're presenting it as your own, now we're compounding the distrust for individuals and for the church. And, it's like you said, we wouldn't take somebody's outline to do it. And even though there are wonderful resources out there, do you guys use Open Church at all?
Off and on.
Okay.
No, it's not as but we're aware of it. And,
So it's something that's put out through Life Church,
right?
And they have a tremendous amount of resources, and there are a lot of those things that we've gone back and looked at. And even early on, when I was trying to preach, I would look at the different sermons and the sermon structures and the outlines and things that were on there, and use them as a basis to try to figure out hey, am I really on point?
Right.
Right. Am I presenting this information well? Maybe there's, I'll pull this or hey, when Craig Groeschel preached this particular passage, he used a story like this. Do I have a similar story that might be able to help communicate the same point? And kind of made some of those comparisons, but in the same way that you would go back and look at other people and commentators and that kind of thing to see how they presented the information. It was not taking that, ripping it off and rewriting it most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
If that was something that happened, I was always pretty clear about, hey, listen, this is a series that we saw done at this church. We're using their template for it because I think the structure and things are there. And I've changed a few things in here, but I really think what he said applies for us. So that's what we're going to go with. That's a different way of doing it, but there's an honesty to that. Sure. Now, it's not something that I do, 13 years later, that's not something I'm doing anymore. And now would be something that if somebody came up to me and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm thinking, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's sit down. I'll help you figure some things out. Don't do this. But when you're in isolation and you have nothing else to do, right? If you don't have that group and that community, it can be an effective tool if used properly.
Yeah, I mean, listen. If these messages and lessons are inspired by God, right, and they're for the church, right? And
100%.
and so I think the issue comes is when we don't cite properly, or at least well enough, so
there have been a ton of issues about that, in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years.
Exactly. But it's too easy to say, Groeschel says it this way, yada, 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 right? And you can, in this sermon, blase. It makes you look deep because it makes it makes the congregation, feel like you're reading and studying and blah blah blah.
There was a significant issue, and I forget who all was involved, but it was one of the things about having, sermons online that's so challenging. Is there was a guy who was preaching through, I think he was preaching through the book of Romans, and people started comparing his sermons to J.D. Greer's, and it was like, bro, that is that sermon.
That's it.
And y'all both didn't do this at 16 years old.
Come on.
The thing where it was legitimately plagiarized, and that caused a significant amount of distrust.
Yeah, it's for what it's worth, it's not worth that.
Right.
I mean, to labor long in your congregation and then to flush it, just because you don't want to cite it or do it properly, or give the proper reference for it. The AI thing is so cutting edge. That it's going to take time for us to get our minds around it. But I don't think there's much to discuss. When we have abdicated our responsibility as pastors, teachers, leaders within the church, influential people in the church, we've just, shifted it over to this computer, right? And there are a lot of folks, unfortunately, that are just putting all their trust in this artificial intelligence machinery and not just going the next step and trying to vet it and check it. Because one of the things that that I was going to say about your reference to Open Church, I was going to say Open AI, but Open Church, is that at least you can go back and say, hey, this is, we got it from this 100%. Site. You can go back and double check. When you have this summarized, distilled presentation by software that's done all this research, you can't give anybody credit other than ChatGPT.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have no way of checking it. And there are times when I'm working on my sermons that I know the verse, the verbiage, but I can't remember the site, and I'll type something, type it into Google to pull it up.
Yep.
I still check it in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because stuff can happen.
Right.
Or they can get the site wrong. Right. There's a responsibility that we have in handling these spiritual responsibilities that we need to be able to, to verify it and feel confident in what it is that we're sharing. And there is that level of accountability, if you will, or vetting that we lose if we just take it at face value that everything this thing is pulling back is legit.
I completely agree, and I'm gonna Google a verse right now, so that we can wrap up on this. And it's from the book of James, and what James says, and this is such an impactful thing for me, and it's James 14:7 is the verse that I'm thinking of, and we're gonna go and verify that real quick because I want to make sure that I got all of the right words in the verse. Kind of doing live the exact same things we were talking about. So
you said 4:7?
4:17.
4:17.
So James 4:17 says this, and we're going to find out right now if this is a real one. So it is sin to know the good and yet not do it. Why I use this verse as it relates to this is one of the things that James is really, I would say convicting is probably the best word to put, right? There's a bunch swimming through my head. Convicting is the best way to put it, is like what it actually looks like to live out the gospel. And one of the things that he brings up at the end of chapter 4 is that it's not just a sin to do the wrong thing. It's a sin to know what the good thing is to do and to do nothing. And there are a lot of opportunities that we have when it comes to technology in particular, whether it's something that has to do with AI, whether it is plagiarism of other people's resources and things online, whether it is just misuse of the information that's at our hands or information that we've been given by somebody. Right. it's a sin for us, particularly those of us who are called to preach and teach and shepherd, for us to not do the right thing. Not just whenever we do something that's wrong, but when we abstain from doing the right thing. And so I think when we look at whether or not AI is morally right for us to use, that we're still in a massive gray area.
Yeah.
You know, that there's a lot of prayer and things that have to go into it. But if we're looking at something and we're trying to figure out, all right, if AI writes my sermon, is that a morally right thing or a morally wrong thing? When we know what we've been called to do,
right,
it's not the good thing.
Right.
And so therefore, in our relationship to the Lord and with our calling to the Lord, that it's sin. And that's when I think that, you know, a lot of this boils down to is that in particular. Whether it's cheating on tests, whether it's misrepresenting the research that we should have done,
right,
in certain areas, or whether it is allowing a computer program to write something that we are supposed to be sincerely impacted by the Holy Spirit in order to deliver.
Right.
There's all that stuff that's part of it. This is going to be one of those conversations that I think we'll be having in another 10 years as well, right?
Indeed.
And then we'll see how it's grown. So maybe, you know, 2035 church resource, we come back to it and realize, no, this was it. But I would say, number one thing, make sure that you're covering any time you use any piece of technology, whether it's a commentary that's been sitting on the shelves there that may be from the Enlightenment period, or whether it is something that's brand new like AI technology. You know, you got to bathe that in prayer. Is it something that you're supposed to be using? Is it going to convey the message that you need to convey?
Right.
And is it honest about what the text is? Number two, if you are a pastor, right, remember this is a tool to help. But it is not the anointed word of God.
It's not.
And inspiring that. And finally, that if you are somebody who thinks that, hey, you know what, using AI is morally wrong, we completely disagree with it, then don't use it.
Facts.
100%.
That's it.
Just don't use it.
Go
if you
peace.
think that it's wrong to not use or to use, then don't use it. And like I said, this will be an ongoing thing, man.
No, I think that's right.
We're going to be walking down this road for
a while,
the foreseeable future,
that's right?
Until the T-800 and Neo come and rescue us from all of it. Which, side note, as we wrap up, did you know the Terminator and the Matrix were both written by the same lady?
No.
So the Terminator and the Matrix, both written by the same lady, and it is a story about the redemptive nature of Jesus Christ. John Connor is Neo.
Shut up.
There you go. And that's your little nugget. Thank you guys for checking out the church resource. If you have things that you want us to talk about or a book that you want us to take a look at, you can email us at thechurchresource@gmail.com. That's thechurchresource@gmail.com. And until next time, y'all have good, get give, and we'll see you.
Holla.